With that, we move on to the fifth session of the day. Traditionally, during our anatomy training, we were told that there were only two spaces in the human body. The one was the luminal surface, which really excited us, and that is how we landed up in gastroenterology. There was a space of peritoneal cavity, pleural cavity, and the pericardial cavity, which was not accessible to the physicians, and most of us were not interested in doing the surgical procedures. But thanks to the recent concepts of getting a third space, and we are lucky to have the innovator of the third space yesterday with us, Professor Pankaj Pasricha, who gave a very elegant talk of the way he thinks about the innovations in the procedure. And to bring it from the bench to bedside, we had none other than Dr. Amit Medhev. I still remember about 6-7 years ago during his ISG presentation, he made the first presentation of poem in ecclesia cardia when most of us at that time had been doing a pneumatic dilatation. I still remember that he presented that 20% of these patients do have pleural effusion, maybe requiring chest drainage. So I thought, who will ever venture into this procedure? But I've been proven utterly wrong, and today third space endoscopy is the need of the hour. To take us through this journey of third space endoscopy, may I request the leading third space endoscopist from Ahmedabad, Dr. Nilay Sharma, to take the proceeding forward. Dr. Nilay, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Anil Arora. I do agree with you that initially we all were skeptical about third space, but now it has become part of our advanced endoscopy. And I think it's the last decade has been very exciting, especially for us endoscopists because of the third space, EUS interventions, and also ESD. Without wasting much time, I will ask Dr. Medhev to tell us more about third space endoscopy. I think everybody knows him. He's a great endoscopist, and I would say he's also a great teacher because I've learned my advanced endoscopy under him. Dr. Medhev, please go ahead and deliver your talk.
Yeah, thank you, Nilay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, I would like to again thank Dr. Anil Arora and his whole team at SGRH for having this superb meeting spaced out over 2 weekends. And as was said earlier, most of all the lectures which have been presented and the discussions have been very lively and very enlightening. And so today the topic which has been given to me is third space endoscopy, which again is very close to my heart. But just before this, I finished a webinar on glue injection, cyanoacrylate glue injection in variceal bleeding. That was again very close to my heart. And to talk about third space endoscopy, as was told to you by Dr. Anil Arora, all of us traditionally as endoscopists know about luminal endoscopy. That's what we have been taught. But according to me, third space endoscopy is the new field which has taken all of us by storm. It has taken endoscopic surgery, therapeutic endoscopy by storm. And first space is luminal endoscopy. Second space, according to me, is endoscopy attached to the ducts of the lumen, that is bile duct and the pancreatic duct, that is cholangioscopy and pancreaticoscopy. And third space is actually not a space, but it is a space which has been created by us because it is a space which is within the layers of the gut wall, which is actually also called as submucosal endoscopy, or it is also called as intramural endoscopy. So if you look at this diagrammatic representation or cartoon, you can see this is where the third space is located. You can see that this is the muscularis propria, this is the muscularis mucosa. So this space in between is the third space. Now what is third space? Third space is nothing but submucosa. So submucosa is the third space. So what is there in the third space? So what is there in the submucosa? What is basically there is a loose areolar tissue, and then you have blood vessels. So where are these blood vessels coming from? Blood vessels are basically coming from outside. It's the esophagus. They are coming from the mediastinum. And these blood vessels are basically coming and supplying the blood to the mucosa. So they have to traverse the third space. They have to traverse the submucosal space. So when you are going in the third space, in the submucosa, you are going to encounter these blood vessels. In addition to that, all that is there is only loose areolar tissue. So you have to create the third space to be able to pass the endoscope inside. As was rightly said by Dr. Anil Arora, this person here, Dr. Jay Pasricha, was actually the first person to bring this idea to the forefront because he did the first animal experiment you see here on the pigs. And along with him, you see here, before him, just a couple of 1 year before, this concept was sort of promoted by Chris Gostout from the Mayo Clinic. And both of them, they conducted some animal experiments on living porcine models. And it was Jay Pasricha who first showed that if we create a tunnel in the submucosal space of the esophagus and we cut the muscle inside the esophagus, the muscularis propria, and then you come out and close the mucosal incision, then all these pigs survived. So that actually gave birth to the third space endoscopy. And today, if you go to see the current applications of third space endoscopy, some of them may not be very really applicable, but there are almost 8 applications of third space endoscopy. First is, of course, peroral endoscopic myotomy or POEM. And then we have got the gastric peroral myotomy, which is also called as GPOEM. Then we have got submucosal tunneling endoscopic resection of submucosal tumors, which is also called as STIR. Then we have got submucosal tunneling endoscopic submucosal dissection or ESD, which is done by using the tunneling approach, also called as STESD or pocket ESD. Then by utilizing the third space, we can also improve upon the results of septotomy in Zenker's as well as esophageal diverticuli, which is also called as DPOEM. Then we have got submucosal tunneling endoscopy myotomy plus fundoplication, which is called as POEM-F. And then we have got submucosal endoscopic myotomy and then removal of tumors beyond the lumen, that is beyond the esophagus or beyond the stomach, which is called as extraluminal tumor dissection, which is called as EXTER. And of course, another procedure which is used for treatment of Hirschsprung's disease, which is a perrectal endoscopic myotomy for this condition. The first beginning of third space endoscopy took place because of the invention of POEM, which was done in 2010 by Haru Inouye. And since the time it has been invented, there have been more than 400 publications on POEM and more than 10,000 procedures of POEM performed all over the world. I still remember when I did the first POEM procedure in our country in October 2012, and then I started talking about it everywhere. It was met with a lot of skepticism. Nilay will also remember I'd gone to Ahmedabad, I'd gone to so many different cities in the country, in gastroenterology meetings, in surgical meetings. I tried to sell this idea that POEM is going to make a big impact and third space endoscopy is going to stay. And today you can see what has happened. Actually, third space endoscopy has become a part and parcel of interventional endoscopy. All of us know how POEM is performed. Basically, 10 to 15 centimeters above the OG junction, we make a mucosal incision and then we enter inside the submucosal space by creating a fluid cushion. And then we make a long tunnel in the submucosal space, go across the OG junction for a few centimeters, and then through the tunnel, we cut the muscle fibers of the muscularis propria, either full thickness or a partial thickness, and then just come up and close the mucosal incision. Well, people perform POEM procedure in different methods. Some do in the anterior way, some do posterior, some do partial thickness or full thickness myotomy. And this is how the POEM procedure is performed. If you want to see what is the current status of the POEM procedure, you can see here there's a meta-analysis published in 2016, 36 studies, 5 database studies. Clinical success of POEM is 98%, significant reduction of LES pressures, IRP, and the time barium height column. You see here the only problem of POEM is post-procedure GERD, abnormal acid exposure around 50%, but symptomatic GERD around 8 to 10% of patients. What about further evidence on POEM? POEM versus laparoscopic Heller's myotomy, another systematic review and meta-analysis. Only 486 patients, 196 in POEM, 290 in lap Heller's group. Overall, not too much of a difference. But again, GERD is more common in POEM as compared to lap Heller's myotomy. What is interesting is very recently, there was a randomized controlled trial in a multi-center study in 8 European centers recently published in NEJM. 221 patients randomly assigned, POEM 112, lap Heller's myotomy with DOR in 109. You see here clinical success, POEM 83%, as against lap Heller's myotomy 81.7%. Serious adverse events also in POEM were quite low as compared to lap Heller's myotomy, but reflux esophagitis, of course, all grades of reflux were included in this, grade A to grade D, and at 2 months, POEM was 57%, lab HELLAS 20%. 24 months, this reduced. POEM 44%, lab HELLAS 29%. And a few years later, in fact, this reflux esophagitis or esophagitis in general appears to be almost similar in both the groups. So POEM is not inferior to lab HELLAS myotomy and DOR. This is very interesting because in lab plus DOR, you're actually adding a fundoplication. POEM, you don't do a fundoplication, but in spite of that, a randomized control trial tells us that POEM is not inferior to lab HELLAS myotomy. Reflux esophagitis is significantly higher in POEM, but we do have some things to treat it. Very interesting study from a thoracic surgery unit from United States, UCA from Demister's unit, 35 patients. And the final conclusion of this paper was thoracic surgeons with an interest in esophageal diseases are encouraged to adapt the POEM procedure. Now, this was in 2016. So even surgeons now are advocating the POEM procedure. Well, this gave birth, as I told you, to other submucosal channeling or third space endoscopy technique. Classic example was removal of subepithelial or submucosal tumors by underwater swimming type of a technique. A relatively simple procedure to do, provided the tumor is big enough so that you can visualize it inside the tunnel. Here, unfortunately, my video is not running, but what we do is we make a cut here in the few centimeters proximal to this tumor, and then by doing a submucosal channeling technique, we can go inside, we can actually see the tumor, dissect out the tumor from all the different directions, and then actually take the tumor out through the mouth by catching the tumor out by using a snare. What is the evidence as far as the submucosal tunneling resection of submucosal tumors is concerned? Systematic review, meta-analysis, there is no randomized study here, but there are 28 studies included in this meta-analysis. Complete resection rate is almost 98%. You can achieve a reasonably good en-bloc resection rate. There are a few simple, small complications which are not very serious adverse events. There is no mortality and no significant morbidity associated with this. Then the next procedure is of course G-POEM or gastric peroral endoscopic myotomy. The basic principle here is in those patients who have got either idiopathic or a diabetic gastroparesis, or more importantly, post-surgery impaired gastric emptying because of the cutting of the vagus nerve in patients who have gone resection anastomosis of the esophagus. And here you can see that if you do a simple thing like peroral endoscopic myotomy of the pylorus, you can achieve a good result. But this has been only in a few studies. This is not what our practical experience states. And what is basically done here is a few centimeters proximal to the pylorus, we make a fluid cushion, then we go inside and we make a tunnel going all towards the pylorus. And once we reach the pyloric ring, again, I will try if the video is working, but if it doesn't work, yeah, fortunately it is working. So you can see here that we are making this fluid cushion. And then after making the fluid cushion, we are going ahead. We keep on dissecting ahead by using any type of knife. And then as we reach the pyloric ring, you can actually see the ring fibers over here. This is a pyloric ring. Now, as against a POEM procedure, in G-POEM, we don't continue the dissection beyond the pylorus because the mucosa in the duodenum is very thin. It is very close proximity to the muscle layer. So if you try to dissect it, you can open up the mucosa. So once this ring is identified by using a special type of a knife here, using the IT knife here, and by a pulling direction, we can cut the muscle fibers of the pylorus and also some fibers of the antrum. So this is an antropyloromyotomy. And by doing this, we hope to achieve a reduction in the impaired gastric emptying. There is only one multi-center study which was published on this particular technique. 30 patients only from various centers. They have reported a technical success of 100%, good clinical response is 86%. But from my personal experience, when we perform a G-POEM, in spite of doing a proper selection of the patient, after doing nuclear studies to show and to prove that there is impaired gastric emptying, in spite of doing a G-POEM, we have not found predictably predictable results. So in fact, we have found them to be predictably unpredictable results. And even if you do a wonderful job, these patients continue to have symptoms and continue to vomit. A very important advance in submucosal tunneling is the utilization of the tunneling technique for ESD. All of those who do ESD know that those who perform ESD, sometimes it's very difficult to do a proper ESD The main reason is we cannot achieve a triangulation by using the normal single channel endoscope which we use. We cannot retract the specimen side, and therefore we have to go inside it and try to dissect it from below. It keeps on flipping around and it becomes difficult, and sometimes such a large lesion, if you want to resect by ESD, it can take a very long time. The first idea that we can perform an ESD by using submucosal tunneling was sort of shown to us by Yamamoto, where he called it as the pocket ESD technique, what he called it. And by using this, you can make the same ESD procedure faster, safer, with a shorter learning curve. I hope these videos can run. You can see here, this is a submucosal tunneling ESD performed in the esophagus for a very large early squamous cancer in the esophagus. Here, of course, when the squamous cancer is engulfing almost 3/4 of the circumference of the esophagus, what we have to do is, it does not suffice to do only one tunnel, but we can make multiple tunnels going towards the gastric end, starting proximally, going distally, and then by dissecting the whole tumor inside through the tunnel, all that we have to do is, after the dissection, we have to join the edges together, and thereby we can achieve a complete resection of the tumor. So here you can see here that the tunnel is now in progress. I'm just going ahead with this video. And the advantage of this is that you don't have to actually catch the area of the tumor, and you don't require a triangulation because you are going inside the tunnel. The cap actually acts as a pushing of it pushes the tumor away from you, and you can actually see the area of the muscle. You keep on dissecting towards the muscle, and then as we proceed further, we can achieve a very good dissection. And if you have a large tumor, you do multiple tunnels like this, and then all that we have to do is join the tunnels, and we can achieve a complete resection. So here you can see how you can do a good resection. Similarly, you can do also for the stomach. Now here you can see this is an early gastric cancer in the stomach. First we are doing the marking, and then proximally we make a cut and we enter the tunnel, and we keep on dissecting below the tumor, and the cap is used for retraction. So the specimen side automatically gets retracted, and to make sure that you reach the proper area, then you make the distal cut a little bit later after you have already made the tunnel, and then you continue through the tunnel until you see a transparent area, and after which you can do a complete cut. And finally you see here, after doing the resection, you can achieve such a nice en bloc resection of the tumor. Of course, DPOM and utilizing the third space for making the septotomy more complete has been a relatively recent development, and this is what we do. Some people may argue that this is unnecessarily making a simple procedure complicated, but the only advantage of this procedure is that by making the submucosal tunneling septotomy, we can do a complete septotomy and thereby prevent recurrence of the dysphagia which can occur. Here you can see that this is the septum. Then you clean the area of the diverticulum as well as clean the area of the esophagus. Then once again, we make a fluid cushion a few centimeters proximal to it in the pharynx, and we enter inside with the endoscope to which a cap is attached. You keep on dissecting ahead until you start visualizing the septum muscle fibers. Now here, because we are in the submucosal space, we can dissect and cut the septal muscle fibers right till its base until you don't see any septum any longer, and then just come out and apply clips on the pharyngeal area. This procedure, it looks a little bit easy, but it is not as simple as it appears, because sometimes when you go inside the submucosal tunnel, you may not be able to locate the septum, especially when you're utilizing this technique for epiphrenic diverticuli, because it is in the pharynx, you can easily locate the septum. And another issue is a lot of blood vessels, so it is a very vascular area in the pharynx. And in the esophagus, the problem is to locate the septum. Second issue is in the pharynx, the mucosa is very thin. So when you do a tunnel and when you go in and do a dissection, usually the mucosa separates out very widely and it becomes very difficult to close it. One of the papers is our own paper published very recently in Endoscopy. You see here operative technical tricks and 12-month outcomes after a diverticulum DPOM in esophagus, epiphrenic as well as Zenker's diverticuli. It's a single center prospective study with only 25 patients. Clinical success was 80%. Median hospitalization was 5 days. We did have some problems like odynophagia in 20%, chest pain in 16%, and vomiting in 8% of patients. But none of these patients, we had any serious adverse events. More importantly, we did not find recurrence in any of these patients. Coming to it, what we are headed towards, we have already now started doing various procedures in the third space. Very likely in the future, because of advanced technique and better instrumentation, we will be slowly be able to enter into the fourth space. Already there are some procedures now which are being invented, where even if you have tumors outside the esophageal lumen or outside the stomach lumen, outside the wall, we can make a tunnel, go inside, make a full thickness myotomy, then enter inside the mediastinum or enter in the peritoneum and take out these tumors which are outside the organ. Well, this is the video of the same type of a procedure. You can see here that we are making the tunnel, we go inside, and then we go out, and here we have dissected out a tumor which is just below the GE junction. So the tunneling was started in the esophagus, and we cut all the muscle fibers, a full thickness myotomy, went out in the peritoneum, and this tumor outside in the peritoneum, which would dissect it out. Just to touch upon fourth space endoscopy, another thing in fourth space endoscopy, or what things you can do in the peritoneum, is per oral endoscopic myotomy with fundoplication, a technique which was described by Inouye here. And here you can see that just at the OG junction, you do a full thickness myotomy, and then you start cutting after you have cut both the muscles, you see the subdiaphragmatic fat pad, which is seen here. You keep on dissecting that fat pad, and once you dissect the fat pad, you go beyond it and enter the peritoneum anteriorly. The most important part is to do a POEM with fundoplication. We have to do an anterior myotomy compulsorily so that you enter the peritoneum. And you have to remember that when you enter outside the muscle wall, you should not be proximal to the diaphragmatic crura. Because even by mistake, if you go proximal to the diaphragmatic crura, and if you have not identified the diaphragmatic crura, you will enter inadvertently into the chest, and that will cause collapse of the lung. And then this patient will require a chest tube. Here you can see an endoscopically done fundoplication by using the POEMF technique. This is another ultra thin scope which has been passed in the stomach. And here you can see how well the fundoplication is. Well, coming to instrumentation, very soon there is going to be a new type of an endoscope which is likely to be introduced into the market. Already some clinical trials are going on, and that will be the multi-armed robotic endoscope. Now just imagine that if you have this multi-armed robotic endoscope and you utilize it through the third space, or maybe even utilize it in the fourth space, just imagine the possibilities what we have. And along with this, we will also have a triangulation with us. And fortunately, just beginning of this year, before the lockdown started, before the corona pandemic engulfed our population and the whole world, I was exposed to this multi-armed robotic endoscope on which I took particular training. And you see here, this is an unbelievable instrument where by using this robot, this is of course the doctor's console. You also have the patient console. And by putting this inside the third space, our possibilities of performing procedures in the submucosal tunnel or maybe beyond the tunnel are going to be limitless. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mahideo, for the overview and your take on third space endoscopy. It was an excellent talk, sir. Thank you. After listening to this talk, I would like to discuss certain points with my panelists. And we have Dr. Sunil Dadich from Jodhpur. We have Dr. Deepak from AIIMS, Delhi. We have Parvi Rai from Lucknow, SGPGI. We have Dr. Seth from Brooklyn, New York, and Dr. Mukesh Kalla. I don't know. I don't see Mukesh Kalla over here. Is Mukesh over there, Mukesh?
Mukesh could not join for medical reasons.
Okay. So Sunil,
Yes.
we used to do dilatation for POEM and for ecclesia cardia, and I still do sometimes dilatation. Do you think dilatation is absolutely out and we should be doing only POEM?
No, I think pneumatic dilatation still plays a role in patients with ecclesia cardia, because whatever we are doing so far, we are not curing it. We are we are just relieving the pressure at the level of G junction and letting the things out of esophagus easily by breaking the LES fibers. So by using pneumatic dilatation, since it has got equal efficacy with any other procedures in type 2 achalasia, it is widely available and it is low cost. It is technically less challenging. Then it is having less procedural time, equal short-term response, and the immediate complications are also equal. The only problem with the pneumatic dilatation compared to other techniques is the long-term response, which is a little bit less compared to the other ones. So I would say in type 2 achalasia cardia, my procedure of choice would be first to go for pneumatic dilatation. In all other types of achalasia like type 3, the choice of procedure would be POEM. But in type 1 and type 2, if you go ahead with the graded version of pneumatic dilatation, you can go away with the symptom. Since there is no cure for this disease, we are just relieving the LES pressure. So I think PD is still going to stay for some time more.
Yeah. Dr. Maide, what do you say? Do you do dilatation? And if you are doing, yes. And if you are not doing, why no?
I'm sorry, Sunil, but I don't agree with you. because see, I'll tell you what, that I personally feel after doing POEM procedure, I feel if you compare POEM with pneumatic dilatation according to me is uncontrolled tearing of the muscle fibers of the esophagus. You don't know what you're tearing. You can't see what you're tearing. And even if you think you have done a good dilatation, suddenly you may have a full thickness perforation. There have been a randomized control trial comparing pneumatic dilatation with POEM, classically demonstrated and clearly demonstrated in literature that it is far, far superior to pneumatic dilatation. POEM, if at all it is compared, it should be compared to a Heller's myotomy because it is like a complete cure for the procedure. I mean, for the problem. I agree with you. It is a palliative procedure because we are not treating the myenteric complex of nerves. And the problem is going to persist. But once you have cut the muscle fibers, the patient is not going to have dysphagia again. Unless the dysphagia occurs because of rejoining, you have not done a complete POEM, or if there is reflux esophagitis and that causes a stricture. So I don't agree with you. In fact, type 1, type 2, type 3, all three are suitable indications for POEM. For type 1, we do a small esophageal cut. Type 2, we do a medium cut. Type 3, we do a long cut.
Dr. Deepak, I know you started doing POEM probably 3 years back. But when you started, see, why am I discussing it? Because in the audience, not everybody would be doing POEM. And when you start, you have certain difficulties. So when you start, what are the levels where you will have difficulty? Means at what stage you will have more difficulty as a beginner?
So I think initially when you are a good endoscopist, you have, I think you have performed in animal model. It is not too much difficulty, but in POEM at every step when you are at learning phase, you have some difficulty. Like in first step when you are creating a bleb, when you are learner, it's very difficult to create a bleb also. Okay. Then second, when you are nicking up the bleb, sometimes there will be blood vessels coming through it. It will cut, there will be bleed. Then initial stage, you got panicked. What is happening? Why there is a bleed? But when you get trained, you feel, oh, that's minor bleed. There will be no problem at all. The third problem, when you are entered into the submucosal space, it's very easy for everyone to just go through the tunnel very fastly. But at G junction, when there is a very tight G junction, then sometimes it takes your patience very, very good way, because when it is tight and it is very difficult to differentiate between whether it is muscles or mucosa, so it becomes difficult in tight G junctions to cross the G junction. And at G junction, when you are crossing G junction, in gastric side, there are very vessels, these are very thick vessels. And if you will not take care of that good vessels, that's large caliber vessels, if it is bleeds, so an initial phase when I was learning, we think, oh, this is esophageal vessels, it will easily tackle. But in gastric side vessels, if it is bleeds, it's very initial phase, it's very nightmare for you. So please take care of the vessels when you are crossing to the gastric side. So if there will be no bleed, you will be happy. It will be, very easy to do the, and myotomy is easy to do. It's not a big problem. And third problem is that when you are closing the myotomy side, mucosal incision site, if it is not clean incision, sometimes it is very difficult to approximate the edges. So it should be clean so that you can easily close it.
Dr. Mahadev, do you want to add on to something? I think even after sometimes having a clean incision, closure is difficult. Like, 3 days back, I had one poem. On one side, there was previous esophageal tuberculosis, so I did anterior poem, and it was a hell of a difficult closure. And of course, then I switched to Cook the clips, which are more robust, which we usually don't do it. But can you just share your experience just for the beginners?
See, as rightly said by Deepak, for a beginner, not at every level you will face a problem. You try to make an incision. Sometimes the incision, you don't know whether you are going deep enough. Sometimes you're too superficial. You're not even cut the muscularis mucosa. So it's important right from the beginning, make a good bleb. Second, after making the bleb, when you make the incision sufficiently. You have to cut the lamina propria. You have to cut the little whitish tissue below the mucosa. Only then you can enter inside. Then, when you make the bleb, when you make the cut, the initial cut, you have to wedge it. You have to make ledges below the cut. Otherwise, you will not be able to enter the submucosal space. You'll keep on pushing. You'll not enter. You'll just tear open the mucosa. And inside the tunnel, I'll tell you what, for a beginner, don't just cut any vessel you see coagulated with a coagrasper. The safest for a beginner. So that you don't take any chances. Don't try to cut it with a knife and be bold that you will coagulate with a knife and cut it. No. And if you find it is too tight at the OG junction, cut the muscle fibers a little bit. If you cut the muscle fibers below, that whole thing will open up and then you can make the tunnel better. So these are a few things. If you can't close the mucosal incision, I'll tell you what, if it is very, very difficult to close, you just apply clips and attach the mucosal edge to the muscle which you see below and keep the patient NBM for a few days with nasogastric feeding. It will heal remarkably. The esophagus heals remarkably. And because you have cut open the OG junction, there is no distal obstruction. There's nothing is going to remain over there, and there will be a good mucosal healing which will take place. But the learning curve is there. At least 60 patients you should be able to do on your own or with somebody standing behind you without any problem. But initially, you will find a lot of difficulty.
Parveer, Dr. Parveer, Dr. Mahadev has touched upon reflux part a bit. So the biggest criticism of poem. So everybody agrees that poem is a great procedure, excellent results. You can do it any type of achalasia, type 1, 2. But the biggest criticism was reflux disease. Personally, I don't think reflux is such a major issue, but would you like to comment on it? Will it kill the procedure, or what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think the most important complication that is talked of for POEM or side effect is a gastroesophageal reflux disease post-procedure. So this procedure is just a decade old. We have 10 years since this procedure started. And if you see, there are now several meta-analyses, leave aside this large case series, but several meta-analyses which do suggest that the symptomatic reflux, gastroesophageal reflux disease is to the tune of up to 20%, that is 8 to 20%. If you see the erosive esophagitis, that is to the tune of around 30%. And if you see the abnormal acid exposure with 24-hour pH-metry, that is from 40 to around 48%. So these are very high. The issue is right now when we are managing patients and they complain, give this symptomatic reflux, we prescribe them PPI and they do very well. Majority of the patients don't have any problem. But the issues are, we don't know how long to continue this PPI. We don't know whether these 24-hour, the esophageal exposure will lead to stenosis in long term, whether this will lead to Barrett's esophagus, whether this will lead to esophageal cancer. Till date, we don't have reports of either Barrett's or esophageal cancer because of this severe esophagitis. But again, the long-term follow-up of these patients will reflect that. So I strongly feel that right now, this is a concern, but it is, since it is adequately managed with PPI at this point of time, we are not much bothered, but we definitely need long-term studies to be sure that we don't land up having these important complications.
Yeah, coming on to that GPOM, and I agree with Dr. Mahideo that not only the results are predictable. See, I've been seeing at least 50 patients every day for years together. I've never come across such a great gastroparesis, except for post-operative phase, where you really need to do something. But I think it is very commonly done, not commonly, but very more frequently done in USA. So can I ask Dr. Seth his take on indications of GPOM, whether it is very much common in USA, and what's his take on the entire procedure as Dr. Seth, please.
So first off, Amit's talk was excellent. He really touched upon, some of the key elements of all different types of POEM, but specifically to GPOEM. I think from an endoscopist point of view, if someone's proficient with esophageal POEM, they could easily apply those skills to GPOEM. I think the biggest challenge is, as pointed out, is patient selection. We still don't have a good way to identify those patients that are ultimately going to do well. The other thing I think that's lagging is the data. We have robust data for esophageal POEM to the point where we're on the horizon of getting reimbursement by insurance companies for esophageal POEM. But GPOEM is lagging a little bit in terms of us being able to better determine which patients are going to do well. I think that the different centers that do perform esophageal POEM, they are starting to, increase the number of GPOEMs, but it's not being done at the same level annually as we see with esophageal POEM. And we also need those trials, comparing GPOEM with whatever the gold standard is, which is obviously quite limited for gastroparesis, endoscopic and surgical management. So I think it's coming along, but I still feel we're a few years away to say that this is a standard approach.
Sunil, how do we make a diagnosis of actually gastroparesis clinically prior to the procedure, and how would we see the response? Because that is the most important thing.
Actually, gastroparesis, you start with the clinical symptom, and we have a index for gastroparesis, which is GCSI, and it's a constellation of many symptoms, and they are scored from 0 to 5. And based on this index, you diagnose a person as having gastroparesis. Apart from this, you can do a gastric retention test. If you have the more than 20% of residue is present in 4 hours, then you diagnose it. The predominant symptom for which GPOEM is considered are nausea and vomiting. It is less being done for bloating and abdomen pain as an indication. Then the gold standard test is gastric emptying scintigraphy using the colloidal sulfur colloid technetium-99 radionuclide scan. And this is the gold standard for testing for diagnosing the gastroparesis. The other test can be used is a pyloric manometry using pyloric planimetry to assess the area of the pylorus. And the another new technique is endoflip, endoluminal flip technique, where you diagnose where you see the surface area of the pylorus as well as the distensibility of the pylorus pre and the post procedure. So with these techniques, you diagnose the gastroparesis, and after doing the GPOEM, you repeat the same GCSI index to look for the symptomatic improvement. Some people also recommend emptying testing to look for the improvement. But I think the flip and other new techniques are, I think, used only for the experimental purpose.
Yeah, Dr. Mahideo, can you tell us in GPOEM whether you will do a vertical incision, transverse incision, anterior incision, posterior incision, any advantage? And we have to be very fast because I think we have only 2 minutes now.
Okay, so posterior incision, number 1. Number 2, always vertical incision. We do not do a horizontal incision. Because it is much easier to close with clips. Because if you do a horizontal incision, you have to always close it with a suturing device. Posterior is better. Why? Because it is much easier for dissection, because you are going along the greater curvature of the stomach. And another very important trick in GPOEM is don't be too far away from the pylorus. Because as I told you in septotomy, you can miss the pylorus and go left or right. So try to be only 2 to 3 centimeters proximal, enter the tunnel, you'll see the pyloric ring immediately.
And this is a question for both Parveer and Deepak. Suppose we see only 2 types of gastroparesis most of the times. One is diabetic gastroparesis. The second one is post-operative. So do you do G-POEM in diabetic gastroparesis? Are you comfortable doing G-POEM in diabetic gastroparesis for both of you? Parveer first.
No, it's okay. Edited by both Dr. Mahadeo and Dr. Said that patient selection is very important. And I think one study has shown that diabetic gastroparesis has less response. However, that's only a retrospective study. But I feel that in diabetic gastroparesis, if you doesn't have a good diabetic control, because that is origin of its pathogenesis, merely only cutting the pyloric rim, as Dr. Mahadeo has also highlighted, that symptoms does not correlate with the outcome. But the patient has symptoms, even if you do pyloromyotomy, the patient doesn't have too much relief. So patient selection is very important, I think.
Parveer, what's your take? And you have to demute yourself.
Yeah. So I think we have just done 2 or 3 cases, and I strongly believe that with the current evidence that is available for G-POEM, as have already been highlighted, it's not a very, very rewarding procedure as POEM. So selection obviously is very, very important, but I think we possibly need more evidence before we start recruiting all patients of diabetic or idiopathic gastroparesis.
And last question, Dr. Mahadeo, about the stir. We do stir mainly in the esophagus and sometimes in the stomach or at the G junction. But many a times I've seen people doing it for small leiomyomas. So can you tell us the real indication of stir?
See, first of all, once you have diagnosed that there is a leiomyoma or any tumor in the submucosal space on EUS, we don't even have to take a FNAC or FNAB. Because only by the EUS morphology, the characteristics, the eco-texture, you can come to know what it looks like, from which layer it is arising. If it is a very tiny leiomyoma, and if it is not giving the patient any symptoms, you don't have to remove it. You can just leave it alone. You can just keep the patient on surveillance, keep a check if the patient develops symptoms. So stir should be done only if the patient has symptoms, number 1. Or if you feel that the tumor is not homogeneous, and it is likely to maybe lead to a malignancy or develop malignant transformation, then you should remove it. Normally, the size, what we keep it is around 5 to 6 centimeters. But even larger tumors can be removed, theoretically speaking.
Yeah. Traumatic tumors, or there is a possibility that this could lead to a potential malignancy, it should be removed. Hello?
Yes, I didn't get you.
Yeah, so I agree with you that only symptomatic or potential malignant tumor should be removed with stir.
Exactly.
Not every tumor you see in esophagus should be, because most of the times they are leiomyomas. If they are asymptomatic, just observe them. You do.
Yeah, it could be even a lipoma, or it could be even a cyst.
I think, Nilay, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, now I think we should now close this session. And I thank all the panelists as well as Dr. Mahadeo for giving us this very important information on third space endoscopy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nilay, for excellent moderation of the session and trying to elucidate what are the initial difficulties in doing the POEM procedure and what are the limitations of the procedure. I'll also try to concur with Dr. Parveer that we do not still know the long-term implications on doing this procedure. And I'll also agree with the other panelists to know what are the proper indications for gastroparesis, because we are still looking forward to have an ideal case which will be benefiting with so-called G-POEM. But I am thankful to Dr. Amit Mahadeo for having brought it from bench to bedside. The very concept of POEM has generated a new field of third space endoscopy. So after digressing from gastroenterology to hepatology to EUS to liver transplantation, now we will have subspecialty of third space endoscopists will be just exclusively doing this. We look forward to that. Not forgetting what Pankaj Pasricha told us yesterday, that there is still unmet need both in G-POEM as well as in POEM to look at the neurohormonal problems which cause motility disorder. So rather than just chopping and cutting the muscles, it is high time we also understand the neuropathology. That is what Pankaj told us yesterday. But meanwhile, he has given us good evidence of opening up a totally new field, which I'm thankful Amit has brought very well to India. With that, I am thankful to all the panelists, moderator and the speaker for making this session very useful and lively. Thank you very much.